Hi YouTube, it's Kathy and this is Taylor.
Hello.
And we've decided to do an episode of Come Drink With Me based around OkCupid questions and how ridiculous they are. I brought more booze for you.
Yay.
Now we're switching to some really delicious summer ale by Bowen. It's a Freestone summer ale, so it tastes like peaches. You see a police officer. How do you feel?
I'm glad this question is on OkCupid because, again, it's good for weeding out people, and it's one of those questions where, if somebody talks about, privilege in their explained answer, then you know that, they're a person who would have compatible politics to me, anyway. If your answer to how do you feel around cops is, well, I feel safe, what's the problem? And that's it, and it stops there, then you are knee-deep in privilege, my friend, with the cases of police brutality, against, indigenous people and against black people. It's, if you feel safe around police, you're probably white. Also, in the States, half of all police killings involve a disability of some kind. And it's disproportionately disabled people of color. If you feel, do I feel safe around police? Most of the time, yes. If I'm having a PSTD flare up and it's harder for me to communicate verbally, then I'll feel nervous around police because I'll probably be behaving in a way that suggests that I'm hiding something to people who don't understand neurodiversity. So I don't always feel safe around police, but given that I am a neurotypical passing white male, obviously I feel most of the time very safe.
They're there to help, but also this question doesn't really take into account the nuance of
It's one of those good OkCupid questions that's just asking for a bunch of ignorant things to be expressed.
Would you be able to date somebody who stuttered?
Would you be able to? As though it would be as you're fucking Florence Nightingale if you can date somebody who stutters.
It's one very small part of somebody's being. Why is it a question?
It's both a small part of someone's being and, depending on the person, a part of their identity.
Yeah.
Because identifying with your disability is there's nothing wrong with that. If you think there's something wrong with that, and I'm not saying that you do.
Oh, no.
If you
I didn't read that.
Yeah, if you think, if you think there's something wrong with identifying with your disability, you have the problem, not them. One of the most attractive people who I know in real life has a stutter.
The only available spot in the entire parking lot is reserved for handicapped. You're in a hurry, and you won't be very long. Do you park there?
Okay, first of all, the handicapped.
Yeah.
I feel like that should be capitalized with a trademark symbol, So let's just basically agree that if you're abled and you use accessible parking, you're being an asshole. Don't.
Yeah.
We'll make that very, very basic agreement. However, 1 in 7 Canadians have a disability. Between 80 and 90% of disabilities are invisible. Mm-hmm. If you are harassing people who are parking in accessible spots because they don't appear disabled to you, you're the asshole. Yep. Stop it.
Yeah, just cut it out.
There's a story of recently of this woman in Ottawa, and somebody busted out their camera and accosted them and was filming them as they were walking out of their car to go into Tim Hortons or something, and they had an invisible disability. But this person was filming them. This abled man was filming this invisibly disabled woman getting out of their car and just to get a fucking cup of coffee. So I would rather 100 abled people use an accessible parking spot and get away with it and not be accosted by anybody than have one invisibly disabled person be harassed. Abled people, if you're watching, if you see somebody park in an accessible parking spot and you don't know whether they're disabled or not, stay in your fucking lane.
Yeah.
Keep your mouth shut, go about your day, and stop harassing invisibly disabled people. Just go through life assuming anybody could be disabled. Because anybody could be.
Yeah.
That person who's slow in front of you in line, consider possible disability.
Yep.
That person who's being somewhat non-compliant and standoffish, consider possible disability. You'll be nicer to everybody. It's just a good thing to do. It's a good idea.
And the one thing that OkCupid actually got right with this question is one of the answers you can put is yes, I am handicapped. So yes, you would park in that spot because you are handicapped, and that is a spot for you.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's good.
Yeah, so they at least thought about that when they were writing this and just didn't assume that every single person on their site does not have a disability.
Yeah.
Do you think it's impolite for people who are not customers to use a store's restroom?
This is one of those things that, like, it's really easy to answer, like, yes, of course that's impolite. But, like, maybe they're a parent and, they need to get home to their kid really quickly. Maybe they're a trans person and the closest restroom, it was a public restroom and there were like a men and women's and they thought somebody might be watching them and patrolling them.
Yeah.
They might be a person with an invisible disability of some kind and they'd love to be able to wait to get home, but they can't. And their only option, like maybe they're poor, they can't buy anything in the store, so they go and use that restroom. It's just like, there's a good chance that if you just like rush to judgment, you might be being discriminatory.
Yeah.
So it's really easy to just, get on your high horse and say, it's impolite. But
When you gotta go, you gotta go.
yeah, just trust people.
Yeah. Like, they're not doing it to inconvenience somebody who is spending money at that establishment. They're doing it because they gotta go. Would you strongly prefer to go out with someone of your own skin color / racial background?
Well, this is complicated. For me, and like I addressed this in my explained answer, I think that because of differences in power dynamics, it's a very different question, I think, for a person of color than it is for a white person, because if you only wanted to date other white people, I would find that really suspect.
Yeah.
But if a person of color only wanted to date other people of color because they've, every time they've dated a white person, it's just been microaggression city.
Yeah. Yeah,
then
definitely.
that's totally fine, because you can't oppress white people on an axis of race.
Yeah,
White
no.
people can be oppressed on an axis of gender if they're trans, or
Or women.
or if they're women. Sorry. Or like are on an axis of disability or class, or class gets a little grayer. But like, you can't oppress white people on an axis of race, so it's not racist to not want to date white people. Sometimes it's just a good idea.
Compared to those who are entirely straight or entirely gay, do you think bisexuals are more or less likely to be unfaithful? This question is bullshit. It's bullshit. It's more bisexual erasure, which is fucking ridiculous because there's way too much of that. I saw a post the other day that was like adamant that if you identify as bisexual but you decide to choose somebody of an opposite sex to date, that you are no longer allowed in the LGBT community because you could have chosen to fall in love with somebody of your own gender and you're just going against that. And I'm like, the fuck is wrong with you? Like, that's not how it works. And the more or less likely to be unfaithful based on their sexual preference? The fuck?
Yeah.
You can't just like stereotype and be like, oh, gay people are more likely to be unfaithful than straight people. Like, where's your data coming from? And you're probably just being an asshole.
Yeah.
There's many things that play into whether or not somebody is unfaithful. One, whether or not they're in something that's considered monogamous.
Yeah.
For example, if something is if they're considering a relationship that is not monogamy and they're seeing multiple partners with consent from their partners, that they know that they are in an open thing, that's not being unfaithful.
Yeah.
Other people might think it is because we're bred to believe that monogamy is the thing that you need to do, but
Yeah.
no.
Yeah, and monogamy works for some people.
Yeah,
and not
it works for some
others.
people and it doesn't work for other people, and just assuming that people are unfaithful if they're seeing more than one person is ridiculous.
The whole idea of unfaithfulness or of betrayal as only ever pertaining to a relationship that is sexual. Like, there can be unfaithfulness in relationships with roommates, in relationships with coworkers, in relationships with non-sexual friends.
Yep.
The idea of unfaithfulness as being a particularly sexual thing is
Yeah.
very weird and creepy and controlling and steeped in centuries of heteropatriarchal bullshit.
Yes. Were you born the same gender as you are now?
So yeah, again, the whole thing about like, you know, you don't just like change genders, you always were that gender. But yeah, again, out of my lane, but
Yeah.
you know, that's that. Correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. But unless your cells have been karyotyped, you don't know 100% what gender you even are. I mean, I can say I was like born the same gender as I am now, in that like I have the same gender I was assigned by the state and loosely identify with and mostly benefit from. And chromosomal arrangements aren't just XX and XY. There's like XXY,
Oh, yeah.
XXXY. I think
many
there's
variants.
XXXY. There's
so, yeah.
yeah. There's I think there's just Y.
Yep.
And even within those chromosomal arrangements, you can have a variety of different sex characteristics. It's a question about gender that was clearly written by a cis person, and like these questions about disability, clearly written by an abled person.
Imagine you have a regular sex partner, but you cannot seem to help them achieve orgasm. Would this bother you?
This is one of those questions I'm glad is there. I think it's a good question, and again, you know, through explained answers or whatever, it might, you know, expose things that, you know, make you think this is not a person for you, or they are a person for you. Again, because we place sex in this container outside of all other aspects of human relationships, a lot of the things that we're willing to have conversations about and considerations around ableism with, outside of sex, we don't apply to sex. Inability to achieve an orgasm is every bit as much a physiological limitation as like you have trouble swallowing, or I mean like swallowing beer, or whatever. But that too.
Nice backtrack.
Yes, thank you. It's every bit as much a physiological limitation as everything else. So like to say that something is wrong with you because you can't have an orgasm or because like you don't want to masturbate, you know, is ableist.
Yep.
It's every bit as much ableism as anything non-sexual. And I think that if we were more willing to have open conversations and dialogues and understandings around physiological limitations with regard to sex, that would make sexual relationships a lot better, a lot more consent driven. Some people can't achieve orgasm, and that's okay. It's not an indictment on you. It's a physiological limitation that another person has, and it doesn't mean they don't enjoy sex.
Yeah, exactly. You can enjoy it and not orgasm. I've been there many times in my life.
Yeah.
Enjoying it's all about enjoying the journey instead of the
Yeah.
destination type of thing.
Mhm.
And if it bothers you that you can't make your partner come, that's your own shit. Like,
Yeah.
that is your
yeah.
own stuff. And sure, feel free to talk about that with your
Mhm.
partner, but don't be upset at them because of their physical
Yeah.
limitations.
I totally get opening up a conversation around it, you know, being like, you know, because certainly for me as like being a guy, it's I've had all this messaging of like, you're not pleasing your partner if you're not always ready for sex, if you're not like, you know, a sex robot machine, you know, then you are, you know, you're not doing your job as a dude. Like
Yeah.
it's
It's so damaging.
It really is, and like it's good to have those conversations and open those dialogues, because you know, if you can understand that, you know, it's you don't have to like give somebody rolling orgasms all the time for sex to be enjoyable for that person, and you know, for them, like having their physiological limitations just respected and understood. That's really gratifying.
Yeah,
No.
exactly. And it's also about communication. Like,
Yeah.
if you're upset because you're not making them achieve orgasm, talk to them about that. Maybe it's something that just doesn't really happen, or they haven't figured out for themselves what really makes it happen for them, or maybe they have figured out what helps them achieve orgasm, and they can teach you how their specific body works, because bodies all work differently.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you for drinking with me, Taylor. If you're seeing this ending, that means that we're not done yet, so look for the next episode next time. Down in the comments below, let us know what you thought about the questions that we answered in this episode, or even the questions that we talked about in this episode, and what your thoughts on them would be on the way down to the comment section. If you hit that subscribe button, that's always a really nice thing to do. You can like and share this as you see fit, and we will see you next time. Bye.
Bye.